Hi, I'm Dennis Weiss, Eagle Communications. Welcome to our town. We're again in the Abilene Public Library in the Malott Room. It's a wonderful room here upstairs at the Abilene Public Library. We have Dave Dillner, the city manager of Abilene. And Dave is here to talk about anything he wants to, but we're going to point him at the revitalization of downtown Abilene, the continued plans that you talked about last time. Since you were here, this has started to spread through the community. In fact, there are multiple boards, agencies, all looking at their piece of the pie, if you will. There's been a lot of activity in Abilene about change since we last talked, Dave. So bring us up to speed and we'll go wherever you want.
Sure. Well, thank you, Dennis, for having me on this version of Our Town. I think what I'll do to start with is just provide an update on where we are with the neighborhood revitalization plan, specifically as it relates to the downtown, as Dennis mentioned. The Economic Development Council has been reviewing some concepts with respect to what we're calling an enhanced neighborhood revitalization district. We currently have a downtown revitalization district that encompasses a wider area than just the downtown, and it provides a rebate on property taxes for improvements that are done within that defined area. What we're looking at now is doing a new program that would be on top of the additional program or the current program that would provide an enhanced rebate of the proposal. The current proposal would be 90% based upon the incremental increase in property taxes or assessed valuation for a period of 10 years. And that would be focused mostly on the core downtown area, which is our downtown business district. And so that's one piece that the Economic Development Council is looking at. And one of the things that they've been talking about is how that will actually play out in terms of the rebate percentage, in terms of the geographic boundaries, in terms of the minimum investment that will be required. And we're looking that at the next meeting next month, we'll have a recommendation for the City Commission to review.
I'm going to ask you some basic questions, help people understand. Sometimes we get going on lingo. Why would a city offer tax rebates for investment in a portion of its community? What's the basic principle of that?
Well, the basic principle is that there is a realization in the community and in various communities throughout the state of Kansas that specific areas within a community require specific attention because they have different issues than maybe other parts of the community. So a great example is with respect to downtown. Downtown is a place where multiple businesses can coexist, but what we've noticed over the last few years is that there are various trends and issues that are coming up that make it more difficult for a business to feasibly set up shop in our downtown. For example, the cost or potential liability associated with historic buildings, for example. And this neighborhood revitalization program would allow a business owner, or more specifically a property owner that owns the building that the business is located in, to do improvements that would make the building more structurally stable or allow it to last longer, and at the same time receive a tax rebate back on those improvements. So one of the reasons we're focusing on the downtown specifically is because we recognize that it is an important piece of our community in terms of our business environment and in terms of commerce. And the second thing is because it has interesting issues and problems that are different than, say, our 14th Street situation or our 14th Street businesses. And so understanding that there are differences and that there are challenges that are different to that environment, we want to create an environment that really allows for it to be more feasible to do a business in that area.
Almost any public policy, we hope anyway, has benefits and cost. And if you look at downtown Abilene, one of the public policies has been to preserve the historic nature of our community. Mm-hmm. And that is a benefit to Abilene.
Right.
But the cost is sometimes hidden, and that is when you're looking at reinvestment in putting new people with new businesses into those buildings. And sometimes the rules over time can evolve, and they have here, to a place where it's not feasible or profitable, at least looking from the outside when you're looking for where do I go to start a new business.
Right.
You look at those historic districts, and there are more impediments in front of you than there are in other places. Industrial areas outside the city, on the edges of the city, and that will not just in our area, but everywhere, that has pushed business to the outskirts of town oftentimes. Is it fair to then say, Dave, if we want to work on preservation downtown Abilene, that what you folks are working on in the way of public policy is simply aimed at giving a healthy way for businesses to prosper downtown, thus preserving what we have? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's a very good statement, because you're exactly right. The buildings are an asset to themselves. If you want to create an environment whereby you preserve your historic structures, I mean, that's a value that many communities in Kansas have decided to go on. But to do that, you have to have programs in place that allow property owners to invest in those properties, because without them, the cost of rehabilitating a 100-year-old building becomes extremely cost prohibitive.
You know, looking at an asset base, I had Tori Barrett from the chamber here last week, and we talked a little bit about this, but looking at Abilene from an asset list, having these historic structures downtown is a tremendous asset, but it has to be able to be employed in the marketplace for somebody to take advantage of that. There are some tremendously cool places to live and to run a business here in Abilene that are vacant today. If you had your magic wand and waved it over that, and suddenly all of the places that would be good for housing were filled with young people, and the places that were good for business were filled with entrepreneurs starting up or expanding a business, that would radically change the outcome over a decade for Abilene.
Definitely, you're exactly right. And so the question is, how do we as the city create a framework or an environment that businesses can do what they do best? And so several things that we're doing, obviously we've talked about the neighborhood revitalization program that we're working on, that will be focused on that downtown area. We're undertaking a review of our development regulations, because we understand that some of our regulations are not necessarily up to the times in terms of allowing or making it more feasible and more cost advantageous to develop some of these buildings and sites. So we're doing different things like that. And it's interesting, I'll give you a good case. So in our downtown, we have a lot of buildings that have upstairs space, but it's underutilized. And I've actually talked to several building owners who would like to do something in their upstairs, but the cost of putting in, for example, just HVAC units is extremely cost prohibitive. But by using this program, that would be one opportunity for them to leverage their tax rebate to put in that infrastructure so that that facility or that space can be used again for commerce.
I think it's a great opportunity for me to say, you know, taxes are a cost of business just like any other cost. If you're writing a check for it, it's a cost of doing business. So by lowering their taxes for a period of time based on the improvements they do to the building, you're lowering their overall cost of doing business, which makes them far more likely to be able to succeed and make a profit. It's really as simple as that. But when you're talking about municipalities, it's back to public policy, code, maybe some law changes on what can happen inside of these buildings, and that's what you do.
Right.
Out in the public sector, we're still looking, as you work through this process, for people that would be very excited about your plan to go invest in business, invest in housing, or whatever turns their crank about downtown Abilene. We would love to see those people start coming to us through your committees and through your offices to talk about what plan they might want to do in downtown Abilene.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The reality is the city's only going to be doing things that deal with regulations or tax incentives or policies that would make it more conducive for development to occur. But at the end of the day, it's really a partnership between the public sector and the private sector. So if the public sector changes its policies and its regulations, then we ultimately need the private investors to then implement a vision for the community, because the city's not going to go out and, for example, purchase the Kirby House lot and build a building on it and open a business, because that's not what government does. But what we can do is create the environment that allows for a private individual or individuals to purchase a piece of property and repurpose it or grow it into a business enterprise, and do so in a in a manner that they can profit on and be prosperous.
You know, I'm not a stock market expert or a bond market expert, but I do pay attention. there's probably hasn't been a time in the last 20 years that the delta between investing in paper assets that you never really touch, that just kind of hold and you watch and see what happens and you don't realize gain until you make a transaction on them, is more different from the opportunity to invest in small business and make it successful. There's plenty of investment money around our area. Mm-hmm. There always is, almost in any area. But our challenge as fellow business owners and just citizens of the community is to look out and find those people, or let those people know that they're welcome to come here and invest in small business and to grow their returns for their plans, their future, their legacy.
You're exactly right. If you go back to the stock market example for a moment, the stock market is a paper transaction, as you mentioned. But if you invest in a downtown or in a community, what you have there is a buy and hold investment, where you'll be able to see the fruits of your investment over a period of time that you may not be able to see. You probably won't be able to see except when you sell an asset or you receive a dividend check from a large corporation. So I think when you compare the two investment strategies, they both have their costs and their benefits, obviously. But one of the benefits I see with respect to investing in one's community is you can see where the rubber hits the road. You can see how your dollars are being allocated, and you can see the end result of that. And I think at the end of the day, that goes a long ways when I'm investing my dollars.
I would characterize our whole conversation here as the positive side of what we're trying to do, what you're trying to do through your offices of government, what I'm trying to do by encouraging other people like our company to invest in our community. There is a negative side, and that is if we don't do anything. Mm-hmm. If we don't do anything, the city of Abilene, I would suggest, will continue to find a need to provide services to its residents. And those costs over time always climb. Mm-hmm. Unless we're in a huge deflationary market, and we are not, right, then those costs will continue to climb, and that is funded by tax revenue, both property tax and sales tax.
That's right.
So the question on how we provide services as a city to our residents is probably always the first one on the top of your list. Every work session, every meeting, the question can be boiled down to, how do I provide these services, or decide which services I provide? How do I fund it, and how do I make that palatable for my community? There's a lot of that conversation going on in Abilene as a community right now. I've sat in a couple of your work sessions where every one of them you're talking about a list of projects, and they all sound good, and I probably think they are, my personal opinion, but you do have to decide which ones you fund.
That's right.
The county is doing the exact same thing. The school district is going through probably its biggest funding question it's had in a long, long time. They need a facilities upgrade, and they have a price tag, and they have a recommendation, and they'll be communicating with the public about $27, $29 million bond issue, depending on how they decide to fund the thing. All of those questions come back to, is there enough investment in Abilene, enough growth in Abilene to make these services possible, or is there not? And that's a challenge I think we face together as a business person and as a city manager. Our job is to help find a way to grow the tax base, and that means more businesses and more people buying more stuff.
Right.
And if we don't do that, then the burden all falls back to those who just live here and buy what we buy and own what we own.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The city has really, we have several revenue sources, but when you boil it right down, we really have two that bring in the majority of our dollars to fund public services, and that is property taxes and sales tax. And so any type of new programs or new projects that the city wants to do, we either have to reduce services, which that means we either remove police officers from the streets, or we reduce the hours of operation, or we reduce services. And at the local level, that means we're going to affect the way our quality of life is, whereas at the federal level, it can be a little more nebulous. So we can cut services, or we can increase our revenues, which boils down to really your property tax and your sales tax. And that's how we fund our services. But we have to understand that you can also fund services without necessarily increasing your property taxes or your retail sales tax if you increase your tax base. And because by doing that, you're in essence growing your revenue base, but you're not increasing the taxes on individual or on current residents and current businesses.
I think that's a very important point, Dave. You know, we did some demographics research for our company a while back, and we find that about 75% of our customers are 55 years and older with no children at home. And that's not just in Abilene, but communities like Abilene.
Sure.
And I think that's a pretty good number here too. So we are looking at the bulk of the citizens of Abilene are in that group where they're pretty concerned about what their property taxes do against a fixed income or what they're about to approach is a fixed income. It is a very important decision that Abilene as a community will make whether we can grow the numbers of people who can contribute to the tax base.
Right.
Because if we can't grow the value of business downtown through sales tax and improvements in property and all of the profit and revenue, then those people buy houses and the natural economic flow of a free market economy. If we can't do that, then we have to fund our services based on who's here now.
Right.
That's kind of the negative side of looking at it, but it certainly is just as true as the fun part of let's go grow downtown Abilene.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Dave, we could go on a long time, and so I'm just going to have you back next month, and we'll continue this conversation, do it the rest of the year. There's a lot going on in the community. I want to encourage you folks at home to look at his face, and when you see him, say hi and ask him a question about what's going on, because Dave, you're out there a lot. I see you walking the streets and,
yep.
and Country Mart and the gas station. So I'm always encouraging people to approach people and ask good questions so you can form a relationship. But your office is right over there in the city building too. It's easy to find. Get engaged with your government, get engaged with the people who are talking about these, whether it's the school, the city, the county, and have the opportunity to say what goes on in Abilene.
Yep.
Thanks for coming today, Dave.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next month.
All right. Thanks.
Folks, thanks for watching. This is Dennis Weiss, Our Town.